Featuring exclusive interviews recorded live from our studio in Boston, Solutions Review presents Expert Insights, conversations with technology builders, analysts, and implementers.
Hey, it's Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and I have the great privilege of speaking with Sanjeev Mohan, founder and principal analyst at his new firm called SanjMo. You may know him as a legendary Gartner analyst in data and analytics, 25 years at Gartner, infamous coverage of the space. Now he is on his own. And he is actually going to be coming our way up here in the Boston area to be presenting the keynote at Denodo's Data Fest in September. Sanjeev, thanks very much for being with us.
First of all, Doug, thank you so much. I am honored to be on your session here. I've been watching your program for a long time. And yes, I am on my way. I am right now in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is baking in this record summer heat. So going to Boston sounds like a wonderful thing to me.
Yeah, it's a little bit soggy, or it's been a little bit soggy, but it'll certainly be a little bit cooler than the Southwest has been.
Yes.
You just went through a pretty significant personal transformation. You started out on your own a couple of years ago, kind of rebooted your whole go-to-market perspective.
Yes.
What gets you excited about where you are right now and the people that you're talking to and the companies that you're engaging, like at Denodo? I mean, tell me what turns you on in terms of where SanjMo is right now.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Very rarely I get to talk about my own personal journey because I think it's really important to share the story, because I was in Gartner, which is the gold standard in our industry, and I learned a lot. It was the one of the best times of my career, just being in that position. But then I wanted to branch out because I wanted to research these bleeding edge technologies. Gartner, being the position, the responsibility it has to cater to its vast consumers who want measured advice. So being on the bleeding edge is not that. So that is the reason why I left. And lo and behold, generative AI happened. But even before generative AI, I was talking about data products, data observability, data contracts, and a lot of these new technologies. What gets me most excited is my zeal to connect the dots, demystify what's going on in this space, and then share it with the community. That to me is the last mile, because a lot of times what happens is, like, even with generative AI, it's like, what should I do? Where do I get started? And I have all these gaps, I have all these questions. So I spend my time researching, writing, talking about these things, learning from the end user community, and then forming a point of view that I share with the community, and we sort of keep the learning process, because then they get back to me. They say, I'm doing this, but here is an interesting twist on what you said. So then I go and I modify. I'll give you a very interesting example. I started looking at data catalogs many, many years ago when GDPR was coming into existence. Denodo has a catalog. There are a lot of data catalogs. So in one of my research, I realized that data catalogs are having a little bit of I wrote an existential crisis, because their adoption sometimes lags. They're not intuitive. The business people don't understand it. There's a sort of a chasm between the business and the IT when it comes to data catalog. But since I wrote that piece of research, I've actually changed my own positioning, because I don't think data catalogs have an existential crisis. They need to exist. They are the single source of trust for metadata, but they have an identity crisis, because they don't know what use case and should it be a standalone? Should it be embedded in other products? Like I said, Denodo has one, even Tableau has one, then the best of breed ones. So this is an example of how I went down a certain path, and then I realized that no, I needed to pivot to something slightly related but different.
You are going to be the featured keynote speaker on day 2 of the Denodo Data Fest, which is, I think, September 13th, if I'm not mistaken. Give us a little bit of a sneak preview about what you're going to be talking about, because I know there's a lot going on right now in the space.
One of the big things that hit us this year, as the whole world is fixated on, is generative AI. So I started looking into generative AI, and very quickly I came to this conclusion that we need to reimagine our data architecture to serve these generative AI use cases. We need to rethink how do we handle not just structured data, because we've been living in this world of modern data stack, and it's mostly structured data. Generative AI is now doing semantic searches on unstructured data like documents, images, pictures, videos, and so on. How do we bring these two worlds together? The last thing we want to do is to have silos. This silo is for my ETL use case, and this is for my generative AI use case, and this is for my reporting and dashboard use cases. So that does not scale. We need to have a unified way to handle these new workloads that not necessarily are always driven by SQL statements. They're driven by a chatbot where I can ask a question in English and it gives me a response. So that is a area of focus for me that I'm super excited to talk about.
Well, I have this real feeling. You and I are both old enough to remember the world before the internet, and
Correct.
we all went through that transformation. And I think at the beginning of when the internet first began, at least from my perspective, there was some hesitancy and I think a little skepticism, quite frankly, about the impact that it would have. I mean, there were some predictions that it was just going to be, a toy and it wasn't going to really have much impact. And obviously, it's been ground shaking, literally seismic in its impact. My sense is we're at that point again with AI, and that what we will see over the next 5 years will make it hard to imagine what it was like 5 years ago in terms of the impact that technology will have on how we go about performing a lot of tasks, but certainly in the data and analytics space.
Doug, I have to agree. For example, when printing press came out, imagine printing press comes out. Do you think people in the world could read or write? No, they never had the need. Only a small fraction of people could read or write. But it had, now when we look back, books are taken for granted. So we don't go back and say, oh, that should never have happened, or automobiles should never have come in. I was amused to find out that when copiers came in, people were thinking this is the end of printing press. Copiers like Xerox, photocopying machines. Same thing when ATMs came in, there was a lot of concern that what happens to banking jobs and banks would shrink. You think banks are shrunk? Banks are now 10, 100 times larger than the number of employees they had when the ATMs came out some 50 years ago or a few decades ago. So my point is that we are still at very early stages of this generative AI. We don't even know the kind of promises it holds for us, but it is going to transform a lot of things that we do today, in my opinion.
An event like Data Fest and other events that you're going to, and I know you're a featured speaker in so many places these days, and there's a big demand to hear what you have to say. My sense is that if you're an end user responsible for this sort of strategic thinking in your organization, and you're not going to these sorts of events, you're really being a little bit derelict, because in the end, this isn't a nice to have anymore. This is a have to have in terms of developing a strategy around the evolution of analytics that's taking place and all the software solutions that are now available.
Mhm.
Well, I'm actually curious because one of the other major seismic events recently was the pandemic, and it caused us all
Right.
to kind of stay virtual, much like this. But this event that you're going to is actually an in-person event, not a virtual event, and so people can come and not only hear what you have to say, but get a chance to interact as well.
Yep, very exciting. I think, especially in generative AI, these face-to-face sessions are hugely beneficial. And why do I say for generative AI? Because it's a new space. We don't know where it's going. It is changing literally on daily basis. So having these face to face and understanding, like for example, a lot of CIOs ask me, what are my use cases? What should I be thinking about for generative AI? They don't know, and they hear all these bad things happening about intellectual property issues, hallucination, identity, or you can morph somebody's voice. So you hear about all these things and you start questioning, is this really something that is as big as it's being made out to be, or is it a hype? So when you come to these events and you talk to each other, you find out that there's always another side of the story. For example, these AI uh, technologies are meant to be mostly a co-pilot, not a pilot. So they give you a lot of knowledge. They can do a lot of stuff like summarize vast amounts of data, find some similarity searches that would be very hard to find. But then the wisdom comes from the human beings. So the human beings have to be in charge. Those who think that AI is going to take over, I'm sorry, we're not there yet, and hopefully we will never be there. Humans would be in charge. AIs would be like having a personal assistant who has memorized all of the internet, and I can ask any kind of questions. But then the complex, advanced reasoning should come from the human beings.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, and it's a point that I've heard made in some of the other conversations that we've had with experts, where you really can't replace the human perspective, creative interpretation, being able to see around corners, in the future. I mean, there's something very advantageous about having humans in the final analysis making the analysis,
Yep.
because you do have that human perspective that quite frankly AI just does not have and won't have. Maybe someday, but it certainly doesn't have it anytime soon. So there should be no fear there. And I think honestly, you're right. It enables in so many ways the kind of horsepower processing and really deep calculation that can happen outside of what has been available, and leveraging tools like Denodo and all the other ones that we cover at Solutions Review, is certainly now on the table in terms of everything that these end users can bring to bear in terms of making the best possible decision.
I could not agree more. In fact, this is the reason why I'm so excited about speaking to the audience at Denodo's Data Fest, is because we are talking about generative AI, and we think generative AI is going to be a big game changer, and looks like it will be. However, we still need to get our data management challenges. We need to overcome those challenges, which we have not. So we still have data quality problems. We have reliability problems. We sometimes have so much complexity that it takes forever to get information, and even when that information comes, we cannot trust it. So we have to think through this holistically, because unless we fix our underlying data problems, generative AI is not going to be that useful. Actually, it'll hallucinate even more if the data is not trustworthy and correct. So that is why I am so focused on ensuring that we look at this problem from bottoms up, not just top down, because if we can have some sort of accountability and ownership of data's availability, quality, reliability, and we have some sort of like transparency and observability into what's happening in terms of even cost, then the generative AI story shines because we now have trustworthy data and it is secure. So I can now put some sort of an English interface on top, ask a question, and I know the responses I'm getting are from trusted sources.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting time, and Solutions Review. We always wonder, have we covered everything? Is that it? Is every category been covered? And it always is mind-boggling to me the next thing to come along, and you're all of a sudden realize, you haven't even touched what's really happening, and the opportunity to hear what you have to say, the opportunity to read what you're writing about. I can't emphasize enough to our audience, and we know a lot about you, and we follow you, and we've written more than a few things that have quoted you. It's almost like there are only a few kind of true experts in the space, and we're going out of our way at Solutions Review to really build relationships with them. Sanjeev is right there at the top. Anytime you get a chance to go see him talk at a keynote or any other event, you should take advantage of it. It's incredibly valuable, and he will always give you the straight perspective. And as you just mentioned, and even when you believe that your ideas are changing, you're happy to tell it like it is, as it is. And so we would obviously encourage everybody who has a chance to register, if you haven't already, to go to DataFest and check out not only the entire show, but Sanjeev's keynote speech as well. And certainly, if you don't get a chance to go to DataFest, by all means, go to denodo.com and check out everything that they're doing with regard to data and analytics and data management. Sanjeev, thanks very much for spending some time with us. We're certainly going to be looking forward to having more conversations in the future. Best of luck at the DataFest keynote, and also best of luck with SanjMo and all the things that you're working on.
Thank you so much. It means a lot. Appreciate it.
You bet.